The box of new locks slipped from the locksmith's hand and struck the brick step with a sharp metallic crack. The sound carried across my grandfather's porch like something breaking for the second time that day. Hospital antiseptic still clung to my coat. I could smell it beneath the cold October rain and the damp leaves gathering along the walkway. The rough edge of the sealed envelope pressed into my index finger as I held it against my chest. My father stood 3 feet away with 2 suitcases beside him. My mother held a certified copy of Grandpa Frank's death certificate, as though it were a key. Behind them, a woman in a navy raincoat balanced a tablet under one arm. A camera bag hung from her shoulder. The locksmith crouched to collect the lockbox he had dropped. Dad looked past me at the front door. "You're leaving tonight," he said. "We've already wasted enough time." I stepped between him and the house, raised the envelope, and met his eyes. "If you came for my house, read this aloud. Before I tell you what my father found inside, I hope you're doing well. And please stay with me to hear what happened next, and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy stories like mine." Dad's name was Dennis Maddox. He was 64 years old, and he still used the same voice he had used when I was 5. Calm, certain, slightly impatient, as if everyone else had already agreed with him and I was only delaying the inevitable. My mother, Colleen, stood beside him with one hand resting on the handle of her suitcase. Her mascara had smudged beneath her eyes, but there was no softness in the way she studied me. The woman with the tablet shifted her weight. "Miss Maddox," she said carefully, "I'm Dana Pierce with North Valley Realty. I was told the property would be vacant this afternoon." "It won't be," I said. Dad gave her a reassuring smile. "Claire is Frank's caregiver. She's upset. Give us a few minutes." I turned to the locksmith. His jacket displayed the name Keystone Lock and Safe. "What's your name?" He straightened. "Paul." "And who hired you, Paul?" Dad answered for him. "I did." I kept my eyes on the locksmith. "What proof were you given that he owns this property?" Paul glanced at the death certificate in my mother's hand. "I was told the owner passed and the daughter inherited. My mother is not the owner." Mom's mouth tightened. "I am Frank Holloway's only biological child." That isn't what he asked. My phone was in my coat pocket, connected to the doorbell camera mounted above the porch light. A small blue ring showed it was recording. I had checked it before stepping outside. Dad noticed my glance and lowered his voice. "Turn that thing off. This is a family matter. You brought a realtor and a locksmith. We brought professionals because you were always going to make this difficult." Dana looked from him to me. "Mr. Maddox, you also said the photographer would have access to the interior at 4. My watch read 4:38. "No one is entering the house," I said. Dad stepped toward me. I did not back away. 6 months earlier, Grandpa Frank had given me the envelope I was holding. We had been sitting in his workshop behind the house. His hip had healed enough for him to walk with a cane, although he still complained that the physical therapist treated him like a chair with opinions. He had taken the envelope from a drawer beneath his workbench and placed it in my hands. The front carried one sentence in his square carpenter's handwriting. "For Dennis and Colleen, if they ever come for the house." I had asked what was inside. "Something they already know," he had said. I asked why he did not send it to them himself. "Because if they never come, you never need to carry it." I had wanted to argue. Instead, I placed it in the locked drawer of his desk and followed his instruction not to open it. That morning, at 9:15, Frank died in a hospital room overlooking a parking garage. By noon, I had signed forms, spoken to the funeral director, called his minister, and answered questions from a nurse whose name I forgot the moment she left the room. By 4:30, the parents who had not called me in years had arrived with luggage. I held the envelope toward Dad. He gave a dry laugh. "Another one of Frank's performances." "Open it." Mom touched his arm. "Dennis, not here." "Why not?" I asked. "You brought witnesses." A silver sedan pulled up behind Dana's car. Molly stepped out. My younger sister was 33, 5 years younger than me. The last time we had spoken for more than 2 minutes had been at a cousin's funeral 18 months earlier. Now she hurried through the rain without an umbrella, her face tense. "What is going on?" she asked. "Claire's refusing to leave," Dad said. "I live here." "You moved back to take care of Grandpa," Molly replied. "That doesn't make the house yours." Dad took the envelope from my hand. He tore it open with his thumb. The first page was a brief letter from Frank. Dad skimmed it, his expression changing only when he reached the final line. Then he pulled out a certified court document. I knew Frank had adopted me when I was 6. He had never hidden that. I had grown up believing my parents had agreed because their marriage was unstable, money was scarce, and they thought I would be safer with him. Frank had always said they had decided it was best. He had never told me the exact words they had signed. Dad started to fold the document. "Read it," I said. "This has nothing to do with the property. You came here claiming blood makes the house yours. Read what you signed when I was 6. His jaw shifted. Dana lowered her tablet. Paul stood beside his truck, holding the unopened lockbox against his chest. Molly moved closer. "What is it?" Dad ignored her. I pointed to the paragraph marked with a narrow strip of yellow paper. "That section." He looked at Mom. She shook her head once. I could have read it myself, but that was not what Frank had intended. My parents had spent 33 years describing what happened as though they had been trapped by poverty, pressure, and an overbearing old man. Frank had left them their own words. Dad read in a low voice, "I voluntarily and unconditionally consent to the adoption of Claire Maddox by Frank Holloway and intend to permanently give up all parental rights to her." Rain tapped against the porch roof. Molly stared at him. "Permanently?" "It was legal language," Mom said quickly. "Your grandfather insisted on it." I reached into the envelope and removed the second document. It was not a court form. It was a signed letter addressed to Frank's attorney. "Read this one too." Dad did not take it. I held it where Molly could see the signatures at the bottom. The letter confirmed that Dennis and Colleen Maddox had each received independent legal advice. It stated that they understood the adoption was permanent. It also said they had no plan to bring me back into their home and wanted Frank to continue without delay. Mom's face lost what little color the rain had left in it. That letter was written under pressure. "Your own attorney represented you. You have no idea what our life was like then. You had almost a year after you left me here." Dad shoved the documents back toward me. "None of this changes the fact that Colleen is Frank's daughter." I caught the pages before the rain could reach them. "You said blood couldn't be erased by paper. Apparently you only believe that when the paper benefits you." Molly flinched. Mom's eyes filled. Her tears were real. That did not make her story true. "Frank took my child," she said. "Now my child is taking my father's home. I had imagined hearing an apology from her when I was young. At 8, I wanted her to say she had been sick. At 12, I wanted her to say Dad had forced her. At 17, I wanted any explanation that did not end with the idea that Molly had been worth keeping and I had not. At 38, I was too tired to beg for a better version. I didn't take anything," I said. "Frank made his decisions while he was alive." Dad turned toward Paul. "Change the locks. We'll settle ownership afterward." Paul did not move. I took the certification of trust from the envelope. "Before you touch that door, I'm calling the estate planning attorney." Dad scoffed. "Frank's lawyer worked for Frank. Frank is dead." I called Evelyn Price and put the phone on speaker. She answered on the third ring. "Claire? I'm on the porch. Dennis and Colleen are here with a locksmith and a realtor. Is the house part of Frank's probate estate?" There was a pause long enough for everyone to hear the rain. "No," Evelyn said. "The property was transferred to the Frank Holloway Revocable Trust in 2016. Who controls it now?" "You do, as successor trustee. The certification in the envelope confirms your authority. No one may change locks, enter, list, or transfer the property without your approval." Paul set the lockbox into the bed of his truck. "I'm out," he said. "No charge for the call." Dad moved toward him. "You accepted the job." From someone who said he controlled the property. Dana closed the cover of her tablet. "I have not signed a listing agreement," she said. "I was here for a preliminary walkthrough based on the information Mr. Maddox supplied." Dad's confidence cracked for the first time. Not completely. Men like my father did not surrender when confronted with facts. They changed the argument. "We'll challenge the trust," he said. "Frank wasn't well. Everyone knows who handled his bills and appointments." Mom wiped beneath her eyes. "You kept us from him," she said. "You moved in, changed everything, and waited." I photographed the lockbox, Dana's business card, the suitcases, and the death certificate in Mom's hand. Any future communication about the property goes through Evelyn. Molly stepped in front of me. They need somewhere stable. They have a house. You know things are tight. No one told me that. Because you don't ask. You had Grandpa your whole life. Now you have this house too. Her voice trembled, but she was not performing. She believed what she was saying. I should have asked what Dad had told her. I should have separated what she knew from what she had assumed. Instead, I gave her the coldest answer available. You chose your side before you got here. Pain crossed her face, then it hardened. She moved back beside Mom. Dad lifted the suitcases and carried them toward his car. This isn't over, he said. I know. They left without the house. But they did not leave defeated. Dad drove away already, making calls. Mom sat beside him, turned toward Molly in the back seat. Even through the rain-streaked windshield, I could see her talking. Paul left next. Dana remained at the foot of the porch. I owe you an explanation, she said. You owe me copies of everything they sent you. I can forward the emails, but I want my broker involved first. That's reasonable. She hesitated. Your father contacted me 6 weeks ago. Frank had still been alive. He said the property would pass to his wife, and that the current occupant might be difficult. Current occupant? Dana reopened her tablet and found the message. The sentence appeared beneath Dad's name. My father-in-law's caregiver may resist leaving, but she has no claim once he is gone. I read it twice. Not daughter, not granddaughter, not even Claire. Caregiver. There were attachments beneath the email. Interior photographs. A floor plan. Measurements of the bedrooms and workshop. Someone had entered the house while Frank and I were gone. Dana scrolled to an earlier message. We need the photos before his condition changes, Dad had written. Afterward, the caregiver may lock everyone out. The email was dated during the week Frank had been admitted to the hospital. My parents had not arrived at the house because grief had confused them. They had been waiting for him to die. The words on Dana's tablet stayed in front of me long after she drove away. My father-in-law's caregiver may resist leaving, but she has no claim once he is gone. I stood alone beneath the porch light, holding my coat closed against the rain. The phrase should have made me angry. Instead, it pulled me backward. My father's wet raincoat had smelled exactly the same the night he left me at Frank's house. I was 5 years old. I did not remember the date then, only the cold water dripping from the hem of Dad's coat onto Grandpa's kitchen floor. My red suitcase stood beside my shoes. It was small enough for me to carry, though Mom had packed it so tightly that the zipper bowed around the corners. She told me I would stay with Grandpa for a few days. Molly was crying in the car. She was still a baby, strapped into a seat I could see through the open front door. Mom kept glancing toward her. Dad and Grandpa were arguing in the kitchen. I could not understand every word. I knew Dad was angry because his voice became quieter when he was most dangerous. A blue ceramic cup sat near the edge of the counter. Dad's hand struck it when he turned. The cup fell and broke into 3 large pieces. I stared at the milk spreading between the tiles. Mom crouched in front of me and pulled my coat collar straight. Just a few days, she said. Be good for Grandpa. I asked whether Molly was staying too. Mom looked toward the car again. She needs me. I did not ask whether I needed her. At 5, children still believe adults will answer important questions without being asked. Dad carried my suitcase to the hallway but did not take it upstairs. Mom kissed the side of my head. Then they left. I watched the red taillights shrink through the rain until the road became dark again. Grandpa did not tell me they would return tomorrow. He did not tell me they loved me in their own way. He picked up the broken cup, wrapped the pieces in newspaper, and washed the milk from the floor. Then he sat beside me on the bottom stair. Which room do you want? He asked. I pointed upstairs. There are 3. The one where I can see the road? He nodded as if I had made a serious decision. Then that one is yours. It was the first choice anyone had given me that night. Frank never rescued me with speeches. He learned what I needed by getting things wrong first. He ruined my hair before school picture day because he tried to braid it from a library book. He packed canned peaches in my lunch for 3 weeks because I said I liked them once. He left the hallway light on after I pretended I was not afraid of waking in a strange house. When my teacher suggested I speak with the school counselor, he did not tell me I should be grateful or that other children had it worse. He drove me there every Thursday and waited in the parking lot with a newspaper folded across the steering wheel. By the time I was 6, I understood that I was not going home. Frank explained the adoption while we sat at the kitchen table, the same place where the blue cup had broken. "You'll be my daughter legally," he said. "That means you won't have to wonder where you'll sleep next month." I asked whether I would still be Molly's sister. Yes. I asked whether my parents had agreed. Frank took longer to answer that question. They agreed it was best. For 32 years, I accepted that sentence because it allowed me to believe everyone had made a painful decision for my safety. The papers Dad read on the porch told a different story. They had not merely agreed I was safer with Frank. They had signed that they intended to give up every parental right they had. That difference followed me through the next 4 days. Frank's funeral was held on Monday morning at a brick church near the old rail yard. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained the color of dirty snow. I let Dennis, Colleen, and Molly attend. Rachel Kim had not entered my life yet. Evelyn Price was still handling the first legal questions, and she had advised me not to create unnecessary conflict around the funeral. I would not have barred them anyway. The service belonged to Frank, not to our argument. Mom sat in the front row on the other side of the aisle. She cried before the minister began speaking. Dad kept one arm around her and greeted relatives as though he were hosting the room. Molly sat between them. I sat alone. That was not entirely true. Frank's former union friends filled the pew behind me. His neighbor, Mr. Talbot, touched my shoulder when he passed. The nurse who had helped after his hip fracture sat near the back. But there was an empty space beside me that no number of people could fill. After the service, we held a small reception at Frank's house. I had not wanted one, but he had left instructions that people should be fed. His instructions were always practical. Sandwich trays covered the dining table. Coffee steamed in large metal dispensers. Wet coats hung along the staircase. I moved between rooms, accepting casseroles and condolences, while Mom began changing the story. I heard her telling my Aunt Linda that Frank had died while only Claire knew how bad things had become. Dad told a cousin that I had handled Frank's appointments, accounts, and legal papers for months. Neither statement was completely false. That made them effective. I had managed Frank's schedule after his hip fracture. I had asked relatives to call before visiting because his therapy exhausted him. I had not sent weekly family updates because most of them had not asked for one. But I had not hidden a dying man in a locked house. When Aunt Linda approached me in the kitchen, she lowered her voice. "Your mother says Frank had memory problems." He didn't. She thinks some papers may have been changed. The trust was created years ago. Her expression shifted. What trust? That told me Mom had not shared the part of the story that weakened her claim. "I'm not discussing the estate today." Linda looked offended. "We're family. Then today should be about Frank." She left before I could soften the sentence. I had become good at drawing boundaries and bad at making them sound like anything other than walls. While I was serving coffee in the dining room, Molly disappeared down the hallway. I did not notice at the time. By Tuesday afternoon, Dana had forwarded her email chain to Evelyn. Evelyn instructed me not to alter, rename, or move the original files. I saved clean copies to a separate drive and left the originals untouched. Then I opened the interior photographs. I knew every room well enough to recognize which floorboard had been refinished and which windows still needed new trim. The photos were recent. A roll of roofing membrane I had ordered sat beside the workshop door. Frank's walker appeared near the guest room. A white medication organizer rested on the kitchen counter. The photographs had been taken while Frank was still alive. The file metadata showed they were created during a hospital appointment in August. I opened my work calendar. That morning, I had driven Frank to Pittsburgh for a cardiac test. We had been gone for almost 6 hours. Someone had entered the house while we were away. I built a timeline the way I would for a delayed construction project. Time of departure. Time of Frank's appointment. Time each photograph was created. Time we returned. People with keys. Frank had given one spare side door key to Mom years earlier. Molly sometimes carried it because Mom worried she would lose it. I enlarged a photograph of the hallway. A dark shape appeared in the old mirror above the console table. It was only a partial reflection. A shoulder, a hand holding a phone, a tan leather bag hanging from the person's arm. I recognized the bag. Molly had carried it to the funeral. A reflection was not enough. I checked the email headers Dana had sent. The photographs had first been emailed from Molly's personal address to Dad. He had forwarded them to Dana after removing Molly's message. The subject line remained in the thread. Photos you asked for. I opened the doorbell camera archive. The side door was outside the camera's main angle, but anyone approaching from the driveway passed through the edge of the frame. At 10:23 that morning, Molly walked toward the house carrying the tan bag. At 11:12, she left. I called her. She answered after 6 rings. What do you want? Did you enter Frank's house in August while we were in Pittsburgh? Silence filled the line. Mom asked me to check on the place. You photographed every bedroom. They wanted a valuation. For what? Estate planning. Frank was alive. That is when people usually plan estates. It wasn't his estate planning, it was theirs. Molly exhaled hard. You changed the lock on the workshop. You kept his files. You controlled every appointment. What was I supposed to think? You could have asked him. He never answered me. You called twice in a year. I called you, after 9 at night when he was already asleep. You always had a reason. The accusation landed because part of it was true. After Frank came home from rehabilitation, I created a schedule. Therapy in the mornings, rest after lunch, calls before visits, no discussions about money when he was tired. I told myself structure protected him. Sometimes it also allowed me to avoid people I did not trust. You still entered without telling us, I said. I had a key. And you sent photographs to Dad so he could arrange a sale before Frank died. I didn't know he was arranging a sale. You didn't ask. Neither did you. You didn't call me when Grandpa went into the hospital. You called after he was dead. He was admitted for less than a day. He died in that day. Her voice cracked. I closed my eyes. There were things I could have said then. I could have told her I had spent that morning answering doctors while Frank struggled to breathe. I could have admitted that I had not thought of her until after he died. Instead, I returned to the safest ground. Send me every message Dad sent you about the photographs. I'm not giving you my phone. Then preserve them. This may become evidence. She laughed without humor. There it is. Everything with you is a file. Files don't change their story. She ended the call. That evening, Evelyn sent me a preliminary inventory checklist Frank had prepared with her the previous year. I began in his study. The room still smelled faintly of cedar shavings from the workshop. His desk chair remained pushed back at the angle he preferred. A pair of reading glasses rested on an open woodworking catalog. I checked each drawer, shelf, and cabinet. Tax records, insurance policies, union pension statements, repair receipts, a folder of medical authorizations. Then I reached the lowest shelf beside the window. The dust was thick, except for one clean rectangle. Something had been removed recently. I returned to the photographs Molly had taken in August. On that shelf sat a gray document box. I enlarged the image. Frank's handwriting appeared across a white label, but the photograph was too soft to read. I checked an older picture from his birthday. The box was visible behind him. Then I opened the porch camera archive from the day of the funeral reception. At 1:47 in the afternoon, Molly stepped outside wearing her coat. She held something flat against her body beneath the fabric. She glanced toward the driveway, walked to her car, and placed the object in the trunk. I paused the video as she turned. For a fraction of a second, the gray lid showed beneath her sleeve. The label was clear. Frank had written 2 words across it. Both girls. Evelyn Price's office occupied the 2nd floor of a converted brick house across from the county courthouse. 2 days after I discovered the missing box, I sat at her conference table with Frank's envelope, Dana's emails, printed camera timestamps, and a photograph of the empty rectangle on his shelf arranged in front of me. Evelyn was in her early 60s, with silver hair cut just below her jaw and the habit of reading every page twice before speaking. Frank had trusted her for nearly 20 years. She had prepared his trust, updated his power of attorney, and kept the original estate planning file in a locked records room. She placed the adoption order beside the consent my parents had signed. You already knew Frank adopted you, she said. What you did not know was how clearly Dennis and Colleen documented their decision. I thought keeping the Maddox name meant the adoption was limited somehow. It wasn't limited. Evelyn pointed to the order. Frank asked that your name remain unchanged because you were already using it at school and knew yourself by it. He did not want adoption to feel like another adult erasing part of your life. So legally, I was his daughter. You still are. Adoption does not disappear when the adoptive parent dies. And Colleen, being his biological daughter, gives her no automatic right to the house? Not while the trust owns it. She opened a folder containing a certified deed. Frank had transferred the house into his revocable trust in 2016, 9 years before his death, and more than 7 years before I returned to care for him. At that time, I had been living nearly 2 hours away, managing renovations for a regional construction company. I had visited Frank on holidays and occasional weekends, but I had not attended his meetings with Evelyn. I had not selected the beneficiaries or reviewed the trust before he signed it. Evelyn showed me her notes from those meetings. Frank had discussed the house, his pension, his savings, his workshop equipment, and the reasons he wanted me to receive the property. He had identified Colleen by name and explained why he was leaving her a smaller cash gift instead. A medical note from the same month recorded that Frank understood his finances, the people in his family, and the consequences of his decisions. He had authorized the doctor to send that narrow assessment directly to Evelyn for his estate planning file. "This is strong," I said. "It is." "Then send all of it to their lawyer. Send the adoption file too. Send the emails and the video of Molly taking the box." Evelyn closed the folder. "No." The answer irritated me more than it should have. "They are accusing me of stealing a house that has belonged to the trust for 9 years. And you want to answer every accusation before they have formally made it. That gives them time to reshape their story around your evidence. I don't want them controlling this story. Then control your response, not their mouths." Evelyn folded her hands. "There is another issue. I prepared the trust. I met with Frank. I may need to testify about his instructions and his capacity. I should not also be the lawyer arguing the case if this becomes contested." She called someone from the adjoining office. A woman about my age entered carrying a legal pad. She introduced herself as Rachel Kim, a trusts and estates litigator from Pittsburgh whom Evelyn had worked with before. Rachel spoke without wasting words. "Evelyn will preserve the original file and serve as a fact witness if necessary. I will handle hostile communications, filings, discovery, and court appearances. From now on, do not contact your parents about the property. Do not contact Molly about the box without going through me. Do not post anything online, and do not send family members copies of documents because you want them to understand. I don't post family business online." Good. Angry people often discover social media after hiring lawyers. I slid the still image of Molly carrying the gray box toward her. She took estate documents from the house during the funeral reception. Rachel examined the image, then the earlier photograph showing the box on Frank's shelf. "Preserve the original video. Do not edit the file or send a compressed copy through text. Evelyn's office will arrange a forensic download if necessary. I want the box returned. We will request it. I want her held responsible. That may happen. But right now, your priority is recovering and preserving the contents. If you accuse her publicly, she may panic, destroy something, or hand everything to your parents' attorney without telling us. I disliked waiting when I knew someone had taken what did not belong to them. In construction, an exposed pipe either passed inspection or it did not. A subcontractor either met the deadline or created a delay. I could identify the problem, document it, and assign the next step. Family litigation allowed everyone to keep talking while facts sat unopened in folders. Rachel gathered the papers I had brought. "You have strong documents," she said. "That does not mean this will be pleasant." The first demand letter arrived the following morning. Dennis and Colleen had retained a lawyer named Victor Shaw. His letter demanded that I preserve every asset associated with Frank. Stop moving or disposing of personal property. Produce a complete inventory and provide financial records covering the 18 months I had lived with him. The letter described me as Frank's live-in caregiver. It said I had assumed control over his appointments, restricted family access, managed household spending, and benefited from repairs paid for with his money. It questioned whether Frank had been vulnerable to undue influence when he named me successor trustee and primary beneficiary. I read the letter twice at my kitchen table. Frank's medication organizer still sat on the counter. I had not moved it because every time I reached for it, I remembered filling the compartments on Sunday nights while he complained that one pill looked exactly like another. The roof repairs appeared in Victor's list of suspicious expenditures. I had managed that project because water had begun entering the third-floor ceiling. Frank paid the contractor from his account because he owned the house through the trust and had approved the work. I had contributed several $1,000s toward electrical upgrades in the room I used as an office. The demand letter transformed every ordinary decision into a possible theft. The nurse invoices became evidence that Frank was weak. The repair contracts became evidence that I was increasing the value of property I expected to inherit. The calendar I created for therapy and rest became evidence that I controlled who could see him. I opened a blank email and began writing a response to Victor Shaw. I explained the leaking roof, Frank's hip fracture, the nurse's schedule, and the calls my family had failed to make. By the third paragraph, I was no longer answering legal allegations. I was prosecuting 33 years of abandonment. Rachel called before I sent it. "Close the draft," she said. "How did you know I was writing one?" "Because clients who organize evidence as quickly as you do usually believe they can also organize the opposing lawyer. His letter is dishonest. Parts of it are slanted. Parts describe facts we will need to explain. I did not isolate Frank. Did you require people to call before visiting?" "Yes, because he needed rest." "Did you sometimes refuse same-day visits?" "Yes." "Did you control his medical calendar?" "I managed it." "Then we do not deny actions that occurred. We provide the context and evidence showing why they occurred." I looked at the unfinished email. What do I say to him? Nothing. I will answer. That afternoon, Aunt Linda called. She began by asking how I was sleeping, then quickly moved to the reason she had dialed. "Your mother says you changed the locks after Frank fell," she said. "I replaced the side door lock after the key stopped turning. Frank approved it." "Did Colleen receive a new key?" "No. Frank did not give her one." "Claire? She was his daughter." "So was I." Linda went quiet. I almost read the adoption consent to her. The certified copy sat within reach on the table. I wanted her to hear that my parents had not lost me through confusion. I wanted one relative to stop treating Colleen's tears as stronger evidence than her signature. Instead, I said, "The property dispute is being handled by lawyers. I'm not discussing documents over the phone." "That sounds cold." "It is accurate. Your mother is devastated. My grandfather died 4 days ago. I'm devastated too." "You don't sound like it." I ended the call politely, then sat in Frank's kitchen with my hands flat against the table. Silence protected the case. It did not protect my reputation. Colleen was offering the family a story they already understood. A grieving daughter had lost her father's home to a controlling caregiver. My version required adoption law, trust dates, medical records, and an admission that they had believed a lie for decades. People usually chose the explanation that demanded the least shame from them. I could not stop them. I could make sure their choice did not alter the evidence. I began building a master timeline. I entered the date Frank created the trust, the date the deed transferred the house, and every meeting listed in Evelyn's notes. I added my work address at the time, mileage records from the company vehicle I used, and project calendars showing I had been working in another county during Frank's estate planning appointments. Next came the 18 months after his hip fracture. Hospital admission, rehabilitation discharge, home health assessments, physical therapy, nurse invoices, cardiology visits, roof inspection, contract signing, bank payments, my contributions toward the electrical work, each entry linked to a document stored in a separate folder. I created read-only copies and left the originals untouched. By midnight, my eyes burned, and the spreadsheet had grown beyond what one person could verify safely. The next morning, my supervisor called about a delayed renovation at an elementary school. A flooring subcontractor had missed a delivery, and the client wanted a revised schedule by the end of the day. "I'll handle it," I said automatically. "You're on bereavement leave. I can work from home." "You can, but that isn't what I asked." I stared at the trust timeline on one screen and the school project schedule on the other. "I need someone to take over the daily subcontractor calls for a week," I said. "I can review the recovery schedule, but I can't run every meeting." It was a small admission. It felt larger. My supervisor assigned the calls to another project manager without making me explain further. For the first time since Frank entered the hospital, I allowed someone else to carry a task before I dropped it. Rachel used the timeline to prepare our initial response. We agreed to preserve the property and produce a formal inventory through the proper process. We rejected the suggestion that I had obtained the trust through undue influence and supplied only the deed date, the certification of trust, and confirmation that the estate planning documents predated my return. We did not send Frank's complete attorney notes. We did not send the adoption consent. We did not mention the missing box. Then Molly's affidavit arrived. She stated that during Frank's final year, I controlled access to the house and failed to provide the family with regular information about his health. She said several attempts to visit had been refused or discouraged. Some of it was true. I had not sent regular updates. Molly and I had barely spoken before Frank's decline, and I did not suddenly treat her as a trusted relative because he became ill. When she called after 9 at night, I told her he was asleep. When Mom asked to visit on a therapy morning, I told her to choose another day. But Molly also swore that I had refused every attempt to arrange a meaningful visit. That was false. I had texts offering 3 alternate dates. I had emails asking Mom and Molly to call Frank during the afternoon. I had a message from Molly saying she would see when things calmed down, and never following up. I placed the affidavit beside the video of her taking the box. "Let me confront her," I told Rachel. "No. She stole documents, and then signed this. We will send a preservation notice and request the box through counsel. She had a chance to return it. And if you call her now, Victor Shaw may argue that the trustee pressured a witness after receiving sworn testimony." The phrase stopped me. I had spent days fearing my parents would turn caregiving into evidence against me. I had not considered how easily anger could create new evidence for them. Rachel leaned forward. "You do not have to be passive. You have to be disciplined." I gave her the original camera file. That evening, a process server came to the house. He was courteous and apologetic. He confirmed my name, handed me a thick packet, and left before the porch light turned on automatically. Dennis and Colleen had filed a formal petition in Orphans Court. They requested judicial supervision of the trust, a complete inventory, restrictions on the sale or disposal of property, and an order preserving financial and medical records. They alleged that Frank's trust might have been affected by incapacity and undue influence. The petition repeatedly described me as the caregiver who moved into Frank's home and became the sole beneficiary. It never clearly said I was his legally adopted daughter. My parents had not merely left out a family detail. They had removed the relationship that explained why Frank had chosen me long before he needed care. I read every exhibit. There were family statements, Molly's affidavit, selected photographs of Frank using his walker, and copies of checks for home repairs. The petition made an old man's ordinary decline look like proof that he could no longer make decisions 9 years earlier. Near the end, I found Dennis's signed declaration. He stated that Frank had always intended the house to remain available to Colleen as his biological daughter. He said he believed I had gained control of Frank's affairs only after moving into the house. Then I reached the final paragraph. I did not know Frank had created a trust until after his death. The sentence was followed by my father's signature and a declaration that his statement was true under penalty of law. Rachel was silent when I read it to her over the phone. "Dana's emails prove he was planning around the trust, don't they?" I asked. "They prove he was planning around the property. We still need evidence that he specifically knew about the trust before Frank died." "I'll find it. I believe you." Her voice changed, becoming quieter and more deliberate. "If that sentence is false, Claire, it changes more than the house." Rachel sent the preservation notice to Molly the next morning. It required her to keep the gray document box, every paper inside it, and any photographs or messages connected to it in their original condition. It also demanded that she return the box through counsel within 48 hours. Molly called me before Rachel finished forwarding the delivery confirmation. "You sent a lawyer after me? You took documents from Frank's study during his funeral reception. I took 1 box. That sentence does not help you." Her breath sharpened through the phone. "I am not a thief. The camera shows you carrying it to your car. Grandpa kept everything from us. Mom spent years wondering what he had written about her. Then you moved in and started deciding who could see him, what we could ask, and which files belonged to you. The files belong to the trust or the estate. They do not belong to you. You always talk like that. Like what? Like every human relationship is a contract you can enforce. I looked at the court petition spread across my dining table. You signed an affidavit accusing me of controlling Frank while holding documents you removed from his house. That is not a relationship problem. I didn't know Dad was going to file it that way. You signed it? He said it only described what happened. Did you read every paragraph? She did not answer. I could have pushed harder. Part of me wanted to keep asking until she admitted Dad had used her. But Rachel had warned me not to turn a preservation request into an interrogation. You have 48 hours, I said. Return the box intact through Rachel's office. If you don't, we will disclose the video and the missing documents in the case. So now you're threatening me. I'm explaining what happens next. You sound exactly like Grandpa. The insult was meant to land. It did. Then you should know I won't change the answer because you don't like it. Molly ended the call. At the time, I imagined the box sitting unopened in her house while she decided whether to return it. Months later, she told me that was not what happened. She had taken it to our parents' home the night after the funeral. Dad placed it on the dining table and told her not to touch anything until Victor Shaw could review it. Mom recognized the label immediately. Both girls. According to Molly, Colleen reached for the box before Dennis stopped her. What is in there? Molly had asked. Old drafts, Dad said. Your grandfather wrote things when he was angry. Mom kept staring at the lid. There's a letter, she said. Frank kept a copy. Dad told her to stop talking. Molly waited until both of them went upstairs, then carried the box to her car and took it home. She opened it on her kitchen floor. Inside were family photographs, copies of guardianship papers, Frank's handwritten notes, letters from lawyers, school records, and a narrow black notebook secured with an elastic band. There were 2 folders. One had my name. The other had hers. Molly opened her own first. I did not know any of that while it was happening. I only knew she had stopped answering my calls and had not returned the box by the end of the first day. I spent that afternoon in a conference call about cracked flooring at the elementary school renovation. The subcontractor blamed the adhesive manufacturer. The manufacturer blamed moisture in the concrete. The architect wanted testing before approving replacement, while the school district wanted a recovery schedule before Monday. Normally, I would have taken control of every conversation. That day, I lost track of a question halfway through my answer. My colleague Marcus messaged me privately. Do you want me to run the testing schedule? My first instinct was no. The project was mine. The delay had started under my supervision. If I handed it off, someone might miss a detail I would have caught. Then I looked at the preservation notice on my desk, the trust petition on my second screen, and the list of documents Rachel still needed from me. I typed back, yes. Take the testing and vendor coordination. Copy me on major decisions. Marcus replied within seconds. Done. No lecture, no judgment, no proof that I had become incompetent because I could not carry everything at once. I closed my eyes for a moment and let someone else do the job I had assigned him. Molly called shortly after 6. I want to meet. Bring the box. I'm bringing something from it. The notice requires the entire box. I know what the notice says. Then why are we meeting? Because I found something with my name on it. Rachel advised against meeting alone, but she did not forbid it. She told me to choose a public place, avoid discussing settlement, and leave if Molly tried to pressure me into changing my legal position. We met the following morning at a diner near the highway, halfway between my house and hers. The breakfast rush had ended. Only 2 booths were occupied. A waitress refilled coffee behind the counter, while an old ceiling fan clicked with every rotation. Molly sat near the window with a manila folder against her chest. The gray box was not with her. I remained standing. Where is it? Safe. That is not an answer. It's at my house. Dad doesn't have it. You have until the deadline. Sit down and read this. I slid into the booth but did not remove my coat. Molly handed me a photocopy. The first page was a letter from Evelyn's predecessor, written 33 years earlier on behalf of Frank. It proposed that Frank take temporary guardianship of both Claire and Molly Maddox for 6 months, while Dennis and Colleen secured stable housing and participated in family counseling. The letter emphasized that the arrangement would not determine permanent custody. It offered separate bedrooms for both children and transportation for supervised visits. My hands stopped moving. Frank had offered to take both of us. I read the response attached behind it. Dad's language was brief. Molly will remain with us. Claire is the one causing the trouble and will be better off in a quieter home. Below his signature was a handwritten note from Mom. I agree. Managing both girls apart would only create more confusion. The waitress approached with a coffee pot. Molly turned her cup upright. I covered mine with my hand. Neither of us spoke until the waitress walked away. If he offered to take both of us, Molly said, why did he only take you? He didn't choose. You ended up here. I stayed with them. Because they decided that. Why? I read Dad's sentence again. Claire is the one causing the trouble. The words did not surprise me. Their clarity did. I remembered telling a teacher that Dad had punched a hole in the laundry room door. I remembered asking Mom why she hid unpaid bills beneath a stack of magazines. I remembered repeating adult arguments because I had not understood that family peace depended on children pretending not to hear them. Molly had been a baby. She could not tell a teacher what happened after dark. She could not ask neighbors why Dad slept in his car after a fight. They could keep looking like a family if they kept you, I said. Molly's face tightened. So I was easier. You were too young to expose them. And you think that makes me feel better? No. You got Grandpa. I got left. You got the quiet house, the good schools, someone who showed up. I was 5 years old, Molly. I did not arrange the adoption to improve my school district. I know that. Do you? Her fingers wrapped around the coffee mug. I grew up hearing that Grandpa wanted you and never wanted me. Every time Mom called him, they fought about you. Every holiday, she said he had already chosen his side. This letter says otherwise. It says he offered 6 months. It says Dad refused. Molly looked toward the window. You think I don't know what living with them was like? I waited. Dad lost jobs and never told us until the notices came. Mom made me call relatives when they needed money because people said yes to me. When they fought, I had to decide which one was too upset to drive. When Dad's investments started failing, they called me every night. That was the first time she admitted the house was not only about fairness. They need Frank's money, I said. They need something. If they lose their house, Mom will ask to move in with me. And helping them take mine prevents that. I didn't think it was yours. You photographed the rooms before Frank died. Dad said Grandpa's estate would need an appraisal. You saw the trust petition. You know better now. She pushed the folder toward me. I brought you the letter. You brought me a copy. Because Dad says it was only a draft. Was it sent? I don't know. The original file and attorney records can establish that. Dad says Frank wrote dozens of things he never sent. Then return the box so the documents can be authenticated. Her eyes hardened again. You care more about proving them wrong than what this means. What does it mean to you? That Grandpa did not reject me. No, he didn't. That they kept me? Yes. She stared down at the copy. I thought they chose me because they loved me more. I could have reached across the table. I did not. Molly had helped them enter Frank's house, photographed his rooms, removed evidence, and signed a statement against me. Her pain explained the road she had taken. It did not erase where she had gone. You need to return the box, I said. Her head lifted. That is all you can say? No. You also need to correct your affidavit. I told the truth about you controlling visits. You told part of it. You left out the dates I offered. You left out the calls you never returned. You signed language saying I refused every meaningful attempt to see him. You did not want us there. I did not trust you. That is different from preventing access. You always find a clean phrase for everything. And you keep treating being hurt as permission to make false statements. Molly stood so quickly the table shook. I came here because I thought you deserved to see the letter. I do. And I appreciate that you brought it. You don't sound appreciative. I am not trading the box or your affidavit for gratitude. She pulled the folder toward herself, but I placed 2 fingers on the photocopy. This stays with me. After a moment, she released it. She left cash beside her untouched coffee and walked out. Rachel immediately requested the underlying file from Evelyn's archive. By afternoon, Evelyn confirmed the proposal appeared in the old guardianship correspondence log. The letter had not been an unsent draft. It had been mailed by certified service, and my parents' signed response had been returned to the attorney. Dad's explanation had failed before he made it. Colleen tried a different one. She called Molly repeatedly that evening and said Frank had offered to take both children because he wanted to punish her for staying with Dennis. According to Mom, he had never intended temporary help. He wanted control. Molly nearly accepted that version because it matched the story she had heard all her life. Frank had kept secrets. The missing box itself proved that. Near midnight, Molly opened it again. She later told me she had been searching for anything showing Frank's offer was manipulative. Instead, she found the narrow black notebook. Most entries were ordinary. Roof measurements. Grocery lists. School pickup times. Reminders to buy my winter boots. Then, in an entry dated when I was 13, Frank had written one sentence beneath the day's appointments. Colleen called about Claire today. I did not tell her. The next morning, Molly appeared outside my house holding the notebook and the manila folder. She still had not brought the entire box. I opened the door, but did not invite her inside. She placed the notebook on the porch table, opened it to the marked page, and pushed it toward me. "He knew Mom came back for you," she said. "He never told you." I did not invite Molly inside. The black notebook lay open on the porch table between us. Its pages held down by the weight of Frank's old brass key ring. The air smelled of wet brick and sawdust from the workshop behind the house. "He knew Mom came back for you," Molly said again. "He decided you didn't need to know." I read the line Frank had written when I was 13. Colleen called about Claire today. I did not tell her. There was no explanation beneath it. The next line reminded him to pick up furnace filters. That was how Frank kept records. A family secret could sit between a doctor's appointment and a grocery list without receiving more space than either one. "Where's the rest of the box?" I asked. "At my house. You were required to return all of it. I brought the notebook because this affects you. Everything in that box affects the case." Molly crossed her arms. "Can you stop being the trustee for 1 minute?" "No, that is exactly what Dad is hoping I'll do." She stared past me through the open doorway. Frank's coat still hung on the hall rack. I had not moved it. "Did he ever tell you Mom called?" she asked. "No." "Did he tell you she tried to come back?" "I don't know what she tried to do." One sentence in a notebook does not tell us that. You don't want it to. I closed the notebook carefully. I want the truth authenticated before Mom turns it into another story. Molly gave a bitter laugh. "You really can make anything sound like a court filing." She left without asking for the notebook back. I took it to the workshop. Frank's tools remained arranged above the workbench by size. Chisels on the left. Clamps beneath the window. Pencils sharpened at both ends in an old blue cup. I stopped when I saw it. Thin white seams ran through the ceramic where the pieces had been glued together. One line crossed the handle, another curved beneath the rim. It was the cup Dad had knocked from the kitchen counter the night he left me. Frank had wrapped the broken pieces in newspaper while I watched. I assumed he had thrown them away. Instead, he had repaired the cup and kept it for 33 years. I lifted it from the bench. The base was uneven from the glue, and one piece had been fitted slightly too high. Frank had not hidden the damage. He had simply made the cup useful again. The letter Molly had shown me lay beside the notebook. "Molly will remain with us. Claire is the one causing the trouble and will be better off in a quieter home." When I was 5, Dad had called me dramatic because I told my kindergarten teacher that he threw a dining chair against the wall. He had not thrown it at anyone. That distinction became the center of his defense. The chair had broken against the baseboard after Mom confronted him about an overdue utility bill. One leg snapped off. Dad left it in the yard and told a neighbor it had been damaged during a move. At school the next morning, I drew a picture of the chair in 3 pieces. My teacher asked what happened. I answered. That evening, Dad leaned over the kitchen table and told me that private family matters were not stories for strangers. "You make people think things are worse than they are," he said. A few weeks later, I mentioned the hole in the laundry room door. After that, I became the child who exaggerated. Molly had been 6 months old when they left me with Frank. She could not describe broken furniture, unpaid bills, or the nights Dad slept in his car after an argument. Keeping her allowed them to remain parents. Giving me away removed the witness who refused to stay quiet. Understanding that did not make the letter easier to hold. It only made my parents' decision more logical. Rachel and Evelyn spent the next 2 days verifying every document Molly had copied. The proposal to care for both girls had not been a private draft. Evelyn found it in the archived correspondence log maintained by the lawyer who handled Frank's original guardianship matter. The letter had been sent by certified mail. Dennis and Colleen's response had been received 11 days later. Frank had not demanded immediate adoption. He proposed temporary guardianship for 6 months while my parents found stable housing and attended family counseling. He offered separate rooms for both children, transportation for visits, and a review at the end of the arrangement. My parents had their own lawyer. Their attorney sent a letter confirming that the consequences of guardianship and later adoption had been explained separately from Frank's counsel. Rachel also traced the rent payment my parents had mentioned whenever they claimed Frank bought control over me. Frank had paid their overdue rent in January of that year, after Mom told him they were facing eviction while she was pregnant with Molly. They left me with him 9 months later. The payment had no condition attached to it. There was no promise involving custody, guardianship, or adoption. Frank had helped them keep their apartment. They later used that help as evidence that he controlled them. "We can establish the sequence," Rachel told me. "That matters." Financial assistance months earlier is not proof that Frank purchased consent. What about the notebook? We need the original pages scanned and preserved. A journal is evidence of what Frank wrote, not automatic proof that every conclusion he made was correct. So Mom can still say he lied. She can say anything. We compare it with independent records. I looked at Frank's handwriting through the clear evidence sleeve. What if he did keep her away? Rachel did not rush to defend him. Then we establish what happened and why. Your case does not require Frank to have made every personal decision correctly. Mine did. For most of my life, I had divided the adults in my childhood into 2 clean categories. My parents had abandoned me. Frank had stayed. If he had denied me a chance to see my mother, that line no longer remained clean. Molly confronted them before I had an answer. I did not witness the conversation. She described parts of it to Rachel later, then repeated the essential details in the corrected statement she eventually signed. She went to our parents' house with the copy of Frank's proposal in her bag. Dad was in the garage sorting bank documents. Mom was in the kitchen making soup, as though ordinary routines could keep the family from changing. Molly placed the letter on the counter. "Why did you tell me Grandpa refused to take me?" Mom read the first page and sat down. Dad did not. "That was an opening position," he said. "Frank wrote whatever made him look generous. It was sent through his lawyer. He knew we weren't giving up a baby. Then why did you give up Claire?" Dad said I had wanted to stay with Frank. Molly reminded him I was 5. He said I cried whenever they tried to bring me home. Molly asked when they had tried. He changed the subject. Mom said losing both daughters would have destroyed her. Molly asked why losing only me had been survivable. Mom began crying. Dad told Molly she did not understand the pressure they had been under. Their marriage was unstable. Money was scarce. I repeated private arguments to teachers and relatives. Frank encouraged me to distrust them. "Claire needed quiet," Dad said. "You needed your mother." Molly asked why they never returned for me after they found a new apartment. Dad said Frank had already turned me against them. Mom said the adoption moved faster than she expected. Molly showed them the letter from their own lawyer, confirming the timeline and the period in which they could have changed their decision. Dad called the document irrelevant. Mom said she had been afraid of him. Then Dad turned on her. "No one forced you to sign." According to Molly, that was the moment the room changed. For decades, they had presented the adoption as something that happened to both of them. Under pressure, Dad treated it as Mom's decision. Mom answered that he had threatened to leave if I returned. Dad said she had wanted a simpler life with one child. Mom said he had called me defective. Each accusation made their legal story weaker and their personal story clearer. Molly left before they finished deciding who had abandoned me more. She called me from her car. "They lied about Grandpa not wanting me," she said. "Yes, they kept me because I was a baby. That appears to be part of it." "Do you know what Dad said?" "He said you wanted to stay." I looked through the workshop window toward the road I used to watch. I wanted them to come back. Molly went quiet. I should have stopped there. Instead, anger took the nearest opening. "You got parents," I said. "I got paperwork proving they didn't want me." Her answer came immediately. Living with them wasn't a prize. I didn't say it was. You act like I grew up with everything you lost. You grew up knowing where they were. I grew up managing them. Mom made me call creditors because people were nicer to a child. Dad disappeared whenever a job fell apart. I learned which relatives would lend money and which motel accepted cash without asking questions. You still help them come from my house, and you still act like suffering gives you the only vote. You removed evidence from a dead man's office. You controlled access to that office before he died. He lived here. So did you. That was always your answer. You were here, so you decided. I gripped the repaired cup too tightly. The ceramic edge pressed into my palm. You chose evidence that helped you and withheld the rest. Because I didn't trust you not to bury what made Grandpa look bad. The accusation hurt because she had found the precise weakness I was trying not to examine. I am not Frank, I said. No. Frank at least pretended he was protecting someone. She disconnected. The line stayed silent against my ear. I had wanted Molly to accept responsibility. Instead, I had used the adoption papers as a weapon to tell her that her childhood mattered less than mine. She had participated in the attempt to remove me from the house. She had lied by omission in her affidavit. None of that justified what I said. Living with our parents had not been a reward. It had simply been a different assignment in the same damaged family. I set the blue cup back on the bench. For the first time, the repair lines did not look comforting. Frank had saved every broken piece and decided how they should fit together. He had done the same with the story of my childhood. Whenever I asked why Mom never visited, he said she was dealing with her own problems. When I asked whether she regretted the adoption, he changed the subject to school, dinner, or something that needed fixing. I had interpreted his silence as restraint. Now it looked like control. Rachel sent Molly a second request for the entire box. This time, the letter stated that if she continued withholding trust or estate records, we would seek a court order compelling their return. Molly responded through Victor Shaw's office that she was obtaining independent legal advice. She did not return my calls. 3 days later, a lawyer named Samuel Ortiz contacted Rachel on Molly's behalf. He said Molly would transfer the black notebook for forensic scanning and produce a preliminary index of the remaining documents. She was not yet willing to surrender the entire box because she believed some materials concerned her personally. Rachel did not accept that position, but she agreed to document the transfer rather than risk losing access to the notebook. Molly brought it to Samuel's office. He photographed the cover, numbered every page, and recorded the condition of the binding before sending it by courier to Rachel. The full entry covered nearly 2 pages. Frank wrote that Colleen had called him from a motel outside Bellwether when I was 13. She said she had left Dennis after another argument. Molly was with her. She asked whether Frank still had room for them. Frank wrote that he asked whether she meant both daughters. Colleen said they could discuss Claire after she and Molly were settled. Frank refused to promise anything without counseling, stable housing, and a plan that did not return me to Dennis's home. Then came the sentence Molly had already shown me. I did not tell Claire. She has finally stopped waiting at the window. I read it until the words blurred. Frank knew I had waited. He knew I watched the road after school and listened for Mom's car whenever headlights crossed the ceiling at night. He also knew she called. He decided that because I had stopped asking, I no longer needed the choice. The next paragraph recorded that Frank contacted his lawyer the following morning. He wanted advice about supervised reunification and whether Colleen could stay temporarily without gaining control over me. That detail complicated my anger but did not remove it. He had considered letting her return. He had considered counseling. He had considered every person involved except the 13-year-old girl whose life would change. At the bottom of the page, Frank wrote one final observation about the call. It was not a legal conclusion or an accusation. It was the kind of physical detail he recorded, because details told him more than explanations. Colleen did not ask whether Claire wanted to see her. She asked whether the upstairs room was still empty. My mother called before I had finished reading the page. Her name appeared on my phone while Frank's notebook still lay open in front of me. I let the call go to voicemail. She called again. On the third attempt, I answered and placed a legal pad beside the phone. "So now you know," Colleen said. Her voice was quiet, almost gentle. That was when she was most convincing. Dad pushed people until they gave way. Mom made them want to move aside for her. I know you called Frank when I was 13. I tried to come back for you. What did you ask him? I told him I had left your father. I told him I wanted my daughters together. Frank's entry did not say that. Where were you planning to live? She paused. What does that have to do with anything? You called from a motel. Were you planning to rent an apartment? I had just walked out of a terrible marriage with one suitcase and a frightened child. I was trying to survive. Were you asking Frank to let you move into his house? I was asking my father for help. With Molly. With both of you. Did you ask to speak to me? Her breath changed. Frank would not allow it. That was not my question. I had spent years being told that you were finally settled and that hearing from me would only confuse you. Then, when I found the courage to leave Dennis, Frank put conditions on whether I could see my own child. What conditions? He wanted counseling, evaluations, supervised visits. He treated me like I was dangerous. Did you agree? I had no money. I had nowhere to live. I could not promise him a perfect life overnight. Did he tell you that you could stay temporarily? He controlled the house. He controlled you. Every offer came with a price. I wrote down her words as she spoke. I did not record the call. Pennsylvania law made secret recording dangerous territory, and Rachel had warned me not to create a legal problem while trying to preserve evidence. What happened after the call? I asked. You know what happened. He kept you. Did you return to Dad? Mom's voice hardened. You think that means I did not love you? I think it means you chose something. You were 13. You were doing well in school. You had friends. You had Frank. Molly had no one but me. You had already used that reason once. That is cruel. It is a question. No, Claire. It is a verdict. She ended the call. I wrote the time at the top of the page and recorded every detail I remembered before memory could rearrange the conversation. Then I called Rachel. She says Frank blocked her, I said. Her statement is useful as a lead, not proof. Rachel replied, Send me your notes. Do not call her back. She said he demanded supervised visits. That may be true. Evelyn is searching the archived file. What if he refused every reasonable way for her to see me? Then that is what the evidence will show. I looked toward the workshop, where the repaired blue cup sat on Frank's bench. You are not going to defend him? My job is to defend the trust and establish facts. It is not to preserve anyone's sainthood. The answer irritated me because it was exactly what I needed to hear. Evelyn called later that afternoon. She had found a memorandum in the old estate planning archive. It had been prepared by the lawyer who advised Frank when Mom called from the motel. The original paper remained in the archived file. Evelyn scanned it in place, recorded the box number and document position, and sent a certified copy to Rachel. The memorandum was dated the morning after Mom's call. Frank had asked what he could legally do if Colleen wanted to re-enter my life. The lawyer's notes listed 4 conditions Frank proposed. Colleen needed stable housing independent of Dennis. She needed to participate in family counseling. She could not take me back into Dennis's home while their marriage remained unstable. Any contact had to proceed at a pace recommended by a counselor and accepted by me. The final condition stopped me. Accepted by Claire. Frank had at least considered my choice when speaking with the lawyer. He had simply never given me the opportunity to make it. The memorandum also recorded that Frank was willing to let Mom and Molly stay at the house for up to 30 days while Colleen arranged housing, provided Dennis did not enter the property and Colleen signed a written plan. He did not simply refuse her, Rachel said during our meeting the next morning. But he also did not tell you she called. Both facts matter. Did Mom respond to the conditions? We have not found a formal response. Molly still had the gray box. Samuel Ortiz had provided an index, but several items remained described only by date and sender. One entry caught Rachel's attention. Draft letter from Frank Holloway to Colleen Maddox. Not mailed. Samuel arranged for the original to be scanned at his office, while Molly's claim over personal documents remained unresolved. Frank had written the letter 2 days after the call. Colleen, you and Molly may stay here temporarily if you have truly left Dennis. He may not enter the house. You will need to make a plan for work, housing, and counseling before you arrive. Claire is not a room you reclaim when your marriage becomes unbearable. She is 13 years old. She has built a life here. You will not tell her she is coming home, ask her to comfort you, or expect her to forget that you left. If she agrees to see you, it will happen slowly and with help. If she does not agree, you will respect that. Frank had not sent the letter. At the bottom, he had written one note to himself. Colleen returned to Dennis before I could mail this. I read the sentence about the room several times. Part of me wanted to thank him. Another part wanted to ask why he believed he had the right to decide that my ignorance was safer than my pain. He had been correct about Mom's instability. He had been correct that she could not move into the house and use me as emotional shelter. He had even written that I should choose whether to see her. Then he had chosen for me. What would have happened if he had told me? I asked Rachel. That is not a legal question. I know. You might have wanted to see her. You might have refused. You might have spent months waiting for someone who returned to her husband after a few days. I already spent years waiting. Rachel did not answer. I folded the copy and returned it to the file. Frank had protected me from one fresh abandonment by hiding proof that my mother had come close enough to disappoint me again. His intention did not erase what he took. That afternoon, I moved the blue cup from the workshop to the kitchen table. The glue lines were still visible. Frank had repaired it, but he had never asked whether I wanted the cup restored. The pattern was becoming difficult to ignore. Molly agreed to meet at Rachel's office 3 days later. Samuel attended with her. Evelyn joined by video, only long enough to identify the archived memorandum and the source of the adoption records. Then disconnected, so Rachel could continue as litigation counsel. Molly placed a small stack of copies on the conference table. The week Mom called Grandpa, she left home with me, she said. How old were you? Rachel asked. 8. I had been 13. Molly remembered Mom waking her before school and telling her to pack clothes for several days. They drove to a roadside motel outside Bellwether and paid cash for 2 nights. Mom told Molly that Dad needed time to realize how much he depended on them. Did she mention me? I asked. Not at first. Molly looked at her hands. She said Grandpa had space. She said he might let us stay if he stopped punishing her. What did she mean by punishing her? I assumed she meant you. Rachel asked whether Molly remembered Mom preparing to meet me. She did not buy anything, or ask what school Claire attended. She did not talk about what she would say. She mostly talked about whether Grandpa would let Dad know where we were. Did she call Frank in front of you? Part of the call. I was watching television. Mom asked whether the upstairs room was empty. Then she went into the bathroom and shut the door. The room? Not her daughter. The same detail appeared in Frank's notebook and Molly's memory. Samuel handed Rachel a photocopy of a motel receipt found inside the gray box. Frank had apparently obtained it years later when Colleen mailed him a bundle of old family papers during one of her brief attempts to reconcile with him. The receipt confirmed the dates. Mom checked into the motel on a Tuesday. She called Frank that evening. She checked out Thursday morning. By Thursday afternoon, she and Molly were back at home with Dennis. What happened? I asked. Molly rubbed her thumb along the edge of the table. Dad came to the motel Wednesday night. They argued in the parking lot. Then he apologized. He promised he had found someone who would lend him money and said things would be different. Were they? For a while. What did Mom say about Grandpa after she returned? That he had tried to make her choose between her husband and her child. She already chose between them when I was 5. Molly's expression tightened, but she did not defend Mom. Rachel arranged the documents in chronological order. Mom left Dennis. Mom took Molly to the motel. Mom called Frank and asked whether the upstairs room was available. Frank consulted a lawyer about temporary housing and supervised reunification. Frank drafted conditions protecting me and allowing Mom and Molly to stay. Mom returned to Dennis before Frank sent the letter. Frank did not tell me any of it. The chain did not make Frank innocent of deciding for me. It also did not support Mom's claim that she had arrived ready to take me home and been turned away. She had arrived needing shelter. I became part of the conversation only after Frank forced her to consider what returning would require. Rachel looked at Molly's original affidavit. You stated Claire refused every meaningful attempt by your family to see Frank. Are you prepared to correct that? Molly looked toward Samuel. I need time. You have had the texts for weeks, I said. I know. You also know Dad described me as a caregiver who appeared at the end of Frank's life. I know. What are you waiting for? Her eyes met mine. If I change it, they lose their best witness. That is not a reason to keep a false statement. If they lose the case, they lose the house money. They were never entitled to it. You can say that because you have somewhere to live. I almost answered with the obvious truth that they had arrived intending to remove me from mine. Instead, I stopped. My anger had already made me use Molly's childhood against her once. I would not repeat it simply because she was wrong now. "What are you afraid will happen?" I asked. She looked surprised by the question. "Dad's investment failed. Their mortgage is worse than Mom knows. If they cannot get money from Grandpa's house, they may lose theirs. That does not make my house available." I did not say it did. "You are still protecting the statement that helps them take it." Molly's eyes filled, but she did not cry. "If they lose their home, they will come to me. Dad already asked whether my guest room could fit 2 dressers. Mom keeps talking about how families take care of each other." There it was. Molly had not helped them because she wanted a mansion or inheritance. She had helped because she was terrified of becoming their final unpaid solution. That fear explained her choices. It did not make them mine to absorb. "I am sorry for what I said after you confronted them," I told her. "Living with them was not a prize. You did not receive the childhood I wanted. I used my pain to dismiss yours." Molly's mouth parted slightly. I continued before the apology could become an escape route. "But I am not withdrawing the request for the box. I am not ignoring the photographs, and I am not accepting an affidavit that leaves out the visits I offered. I didn't ask you to. You keep asking me to understand why you did it. I want you to. I do. Understanding is not the same as removing the consequence." Samuel looked down at his notes. Rachel remained silent. Molly nodded once. "I will review the affidavit with Samuel. That is your decision." She gathered her bag. Before leaving, she stopped beside my chair. "Do you forgive Grandpa?" The question caught me off guard. He did not ask. "He is dead." That does not make the answer simple. Molly left with Samuel. Rachel waited until the door closed. That was better. "What was?" "You apologize for what was yours without surrendering what was not." I looked at the motel receipt. "I learned from documents." Rachel almost smiled. "Mom left a voicemail that evening. She must have known Molly had met with us because her message began without greeting. 'You are turning your sister against us just as Frank turned you against me.' I came to him because I had nowhere else to go, and he had all that space. I thought once we were safe, I could talk to you. He would not even let me through the door unless I agreed to let strangers judge whether I deserved my own child." Her voice cracked near the end. "I was trying to survive, Claire. Someday you may understand what a woman does when she has no place left." The message stopped. I saved the original voicemail and sent a copy to Rachel, without changing the file. Mom had given us the missing connection in her own words. She had called because she had nowhere to go. She had called because Frank had space. She claimed she would have talked to me later, after she and Molly were secure. I was not the purpose of her return. I was a possibility she might address once her immediate crisis had passed. That knowledge should have vindicated Frank completely. It did not. He had been right about her motive and wrong to hide the choice from me. Both truths remained standing. 4 days later, Molly returned the full gray box through Samuel's office. Every item was indexed, photographed, and transferred with a signed receipt. She had not yet corrected her affidavit. Rachel began preparing a motion to compel the financial and title records connected to Dad's planned sale. Dana's emails showed he wanted speed, but not why. Molly came to the house that Saturday to sign the final transfer acknowledgement. She did not come inside. We stood on the same porch where Dad had ordered me to leave. "I need to tell you something before Discovery reaches it," she said. "What?" "Dad called me last night. He said the bank cannot wait much longer." "For what?" "I do not know every detail. There is a second mortgage, and something tied to the investment." "When is the deadline?" Her face looked older than it had at Frank's funeral. 6 weeks. I glanced toward the house behind me. Molly followed my eyes. "If they lose your house," she said, "they lose theirs next." Molly called me the morning after she warned me about the bank deadline. "I can prove it," she said. I took a picture of a letter on Dad's desk. "Do not send it." She went silent. "You don't even know what it says." "I know it was in their house, addressed to Dad, and you photographed it without permission. He left it open beside the printer. That does not make it ours. The bank gave him 6 weeks. Then Rachel can request the relevant records through discovery. Molly exhaled sharply. By the time your lawyers finish requesting things, Mom and Dad may have nowhere to live. That does not give us permission to take private documents. You're protecting them now? I'm protecting the case. She had expected me to seize anything that could damage Dad. 6 months earlier, I might have thought refusing evidence made me weak. By then, I understood that a fact obtained the wrong way could become a distraction, an accusation, or an excuse for the other side to avoid answering what mattered. Delete the picture if Samuel tells you to, I said. Tell him what you saw. Let him decide whether you can describe it in a statement. You really trust lawyers more than family. No, I trust a process that records who said what. Rachel approved of the decision when I told her. Do not ask Molly for the image, she said. Do not ask her to search their home, copy mail, or access accounts. We already have lawful routes. What if the bank deadline passes before we get the records? The deadline is their problem unless they connect it to the house they are trying to take from you. She leaned back in her chair and studied me through the video call. You sound disappointed. I want to know why they came so quickly. We will. I could know today. And spend the next 3 months arguing about how you obtained it. I closed the notebook in front of me. Use the lawful route. We already did. Dana Pierce had received a subpoena for the complete email chain with Dad, including attachments, forwarded messages, and scheduling notes. She complied through her broker's lawyer. The first email I had seen on her tablet described me as Frank's caregiver. The full chain showed how much planning sat behind that one sentence. Dad contacted Dana 6 weeks before Frank died. He said the property would need a fast sale after an expected family transition. He asked how quickly she could prepare photographs, a market analysis, and a listing package. Dana told him she could not sign a listing agreement without verifying ownership and authority after Frank's death. Dad replied that Colleen was Frank's only biological child, and that the current occupant had no ownership interest. He attached Molly's photographs and a floor plan copied from an old renovation permit. 2 weeks later, he asked whether Dana had buyers who could close without repairs. She explained that selling below market value for speed could cost tens of thousands of dollars. Dad answered, closing before December 20th matters more than squeezing out the highest price. This is tied to a bank matter. Frank died on October 2nd. Dad had intended to remove me, list the house, find a buyer, and close in less than 11 weeks. That was not a grieving son-in-law misunderstanding inheritance law. It was a timetable. Rachel placed the email beside Dad's declaration that he only wanted to protect Frank's wishes. He claims the house should remain a family asset, she said, but here he instructs the realtor to prioritize speed over value. Because of the bank, we still need admissible evidence showing what bank matter he meant. Written discovery had already required Dad and Mom to produce documents connected to any financial interest they claimed in Frank's property and any reason they had urged an immediate sale. Victor Shaw objected that their personal finances were private and irrelevant. Rachel narrowed the request. She did not ask for every checking account, credit card purchase, or retirement statement. She requested only documents supporting Dad's stated need for a sale before December 20th, any debt he intended to pay with proceeds from Frank's house, and communications in which he described the property as a source of repayment. The narrower request was harder to resist. The production arrived in 3 batches. The first contained a second mortgage agreement on my parents' suburban house. Dad had borrowed against the equity 18 months earlier. The balance was larger than Molly had guessed. The second contained records from a private real estate investment. Dad had placed most of their accessible retirement savings into a development outside Harrisburg. Construction costs rose, the main lender withdrew, and the project stopped before completion. The third contained a notice from the bank requiring Dad to cure a loan deficiency by December 20th or face additional collection action against pledged assets. The numbers were serious, but they were not impossible wealth or a secret criminal empire. Dad had made one reckless investment, borrowed more to protect it, and hidden how close the plan was to collapsing. Frank's house had been his exit. Molly learned the full amount before I did. She later told me that Mom discovered it during preparation for her deposition. Victor showed her the second mortgage, the investment agreement, and the bank notice, because she would be questioned about why they had demanded a rapid sale. Mom called Dad into the conference room. She asked why the second mortgage balance was more than twice the amount he had told her. Dad said the investment would have recovered if Frank had lived a few more months. Mom asked what Frank's death had to do with a project near Harrisburg. Dad told her not to be dramatic. That phrase had followed every Maddox woman into adulthood. According to Molly, Mom pushed the bank notice across the table and asked whether he had planned to use her father's house to hide the loss. Dad answered that Frank's house was an asset coming into the family anyway. Mom said he had described it as a bonus. Dad replied, "I said what you needed to hear." They argued loudly enough that Victor ended the preparation session. Molly called me afterward from the parking lot. Mom didn't know, she said. She knew they came to take the house. She did not know how much he owed. That changes what he hid from her. It does not change what she did to me. I know. Her answer sounded tired rather than defensive. Dad says the investment was supposed to secure their retirement. He thinks if Grandpa had left the house to Mom, no one would have been hurt. I would have been removed from my home. He doesn't count that as harm because you have a salary. I looked around Frank's kitchen. The cabinets needed refinishing. A water stain remained near the back window. Nothing about the room looked like an effortless $700,000 windfall. He believes people with jobs cannot be robbed, I said. He believes you always land on your feet. They left me because they expected Frank to catch me. Molly did not answer. 2 days later, Victor sent a settlement proposal. Dennis and Colleen would withdraw their request to remove me as trustee and stop seeking immediate control of the property. In exchange, I would agree to sell the house within 1 year and pay Colleen $200,000 from the proceeds. They would not admit the trust was valid. They would not withdraw the accusation that I isolated Frank. They would not acknowledge the adoption documents or the emails to Dana. The proposal called itself a family resolution. Dad added a personal letter. He wrote that litigation would consume Frank's savings, damage my career, and permanently destroy any chance of repairing my relationship with Mom and Molly. He said selling the house would free me from maintenance costs and allow Colleen to receive what any reasonable father would have left his only biological child. He ended with one sentence. Peace requires everyone to give something. I read the proposal at my dining table while rain moved against the windows. The trust had a cash reserve for taxes, insurance, repairs, and legal expenses. It could fund the case, but every invoice reduced what Frank had spent decades saving. My job had suffered. Marcus was still handling daily vendor coordination on the school project. I had postponed a site visit and missed 2 internal planning meetings. No one threatened to fire me, but competence had always been the place where I felt safest. The lawsuit had entered that space too. Selling would end the monthly legal bills. It would also convert Dad's pressure into a reward. I asked Rachel what she would do. That is not the question, she said. It is the question I am paying you to answer. You are paying me to explain the risks and help you reach your objective. I cannot choose the objective for you. What are the risks? The case is strong, not automatic. Litigation costs money. Witnesses become uncertain. Judges can narrow issues in ways neither side expects. Even if you win, you may not recover all fees. And if I settle? You lose the house on a schedule Dennis helped create. You pay Colleen $200,000. They preserve their public claim that the trust was questionable. I looked at Dad's letter. What would a practical settlement look like? Rachel took out a clean legal pad. Tell me what you need, not what would punish them. I had spent months thinking about what they deserved. The question forced me to think about what I could enforce. I keep the house. She wrote it down. They withdraw every claim against the trust and my position as trustee. She continued writing. They stop saying I abused, isolated, or manipulated Frank. That can be addressed through a written retraction or settlement language. They do not enter the property unless I invite them. We can seek an agreed no-entry provision. All communication goes through counsel while the case is active. Molly cannot be used as a messenger. Rachel looked up. Do you require an apology? I thought of Mom crying on the porch. Dad reading the consent as though legal language had acted without him. Molly asking whether Frank had ever wanted her. No. Do you require them to admit they abandoned you? No. Do you require reimbursement for every dollar spent? I want reasonable costs caused by false statements and withheld records addressed. I do not need to bankrupt them. Rachel capped her pen. That is a litigation objective. Their proposal is not. I declined the offer. Victor responded that my refusal proved I cared more about control than family peace. Rachel did not answer the insult. She sent a counter-proposal containing the terms I had identified. Dad rejected it the same day. He still believed time favored him. Then the title company records arrived. Rachel had discovered the company through an invoice included in Dad's limited document production. 4 years before Frank died, Dad paid Western Keystone Title Research for a property ownership report on Frank's address. Rachel issued a subpoena seeking the report and the related business correspondence. The company produced both. The report was dated April 12, 2021. At the top of the ownership section, it listed Frank Holloway, trustee of the Frank Holloway Revocable Trust, dated August 18, 2016. The report included the recorded deed transferring the house into the trust. Dad received it by email that afternoon. 9 minutes later, he replied to the title officer. If Colleen is his only biological child, can she challenge this after he dies? The title officer responded that the company did not provide legal advice and suggested he consult an attorney. Dad wrote back asking whether the deed could still be reversed if Frank later became incompetent. Again, the title officer declined to advise him. The correspondence ended there. I checked the date against my own records. In April of 2021, I lived in Pittsburgh. I was managing the renovation of a municipal library and had not spent more than 1 weekend a month in Bellwether. Frank had not broken his hip. I had not moved into his house. Dad already knew the trust existed. He had already asked how Colleen might attack it after Frank died. Rachel compared the report with the declaration Dad had signed after filing the petition. I did not know Frank had created a trust until after his death. The two documents could not both be true. It could be a memory failure, I said. Rachel studied me. You are trying to be fair to him. I am trying to understand what he will say. He may say he forgot a report he ordered and questions he personally emailed. Would that work? It depends on credibility. But it becomes harder if he repeats the statement after receiving discovery. Victor received the title company production the same day we did. He had time to correct Dad's declaration. Instead, he filed supplemental affidavits in support of their opposition to our motion for protective relief. Dad reaffirmed that he first learned of the trust after Frank's death. He added that he had never made plans regarding the house while Frank was alive. Mom signed a separate affidavit stating that I had prevented all meaningful contact with Frank during his final years and had concealed his declining condition. Rachel placed Mom's affidavit beside the shared calendar, nurse logs, and messages offering alternate visit dates. Then she placed Dad's affidavit beside the property report and title company emails. They had the evidence before signing these, I said. Yes. Victor let them file anyway? We do not know what they told Victor. We only know what they swore. My deposition was scheduled for the next morning. Dad's would follow mine, with Mom's set for the next day. I had expected to feel satisfied when we found proof that Dad lied. Instead, I felt the same pressure I remembered from childhood whenever he denied something I had watched him do. The broken chair had become damaged furniture. The hole in the door had become an accident. Abandoning me had become respecting my choice. Now a title report with his own email response had become something he had never known. Rachel slid the documents into separate folders and closed them. Get some sleep, she said. Victor questions you first. And then, she rested one hand on Dad's affidavit. Tomorrow he answers both under oath. The court reporter asked me to raise my right hand at 9 o'clock the next morning. We were not in a courtroom. The deposition took place in a windowless conference room at Victor Shaw's office, with a long table, a water pitcher, and a camera positioned near the wall. The room looked ordinary enough to make every answer feel more exposed. Victor sat across from me with 3 binders open before him. Rachel sat at my right. After I gave my name and address, Victor began with the 18 months I had lived with Frank. You controlled his calendar, correct? I managed his medical and therapy appointments after he broke his hip. That was not my question. Yes, I maintained the calendar. You required relatives to contact you before visiting. I asked them to call before arriving because Frank had physical therapy, nurse visits, and rest periods. Did you ever tell Colleen Maddox she could not come to the house? I told her not to come during one therapy session. I offered 3 alternate dates. You considered yourself entitled to decide when a daughter could see her father. I considered Frank entitled to decide when he wanted visitors. Victor turned to another page. You changed a lock. The side door lock stopped working. Frank approved the replacement. Did Colleen receive a new key? No. Why not? Frank did not authorize one. Or you did not want her to have access. I did not trust her with unrestricted access. Frank made the final decision. Rachel had warned me not to treat every accusation like an invitation to fight. A deposition was not a place to sound perfect. It was a place to remain accurate. Victor asked why I had not sent Molly regular health updates. I did not think she was seriously interested until the property became an issue. Rachel glanced at me, but she did not interrupt. Victor leaned forward. So you judged her motives and withheld information. I judged her motives. That was unfair. I still did not prevent her from contacting Frank. I sent proposed times for calls and visits, some of which were inconvenient, some of which she did not answer. He displayed a photograph of Frank using his walker. Would you agree that this man was physically vulnerable? Yes. Would you agree he depended on you? For transportation and some household tasks, yes. Would you agree you benefited financially from his decision to leave you the house? Yes. The word remained in the room. I could have qualified it. I could have explained property taxes, insurance, repairs, legal expenses, and the leaking roof. None of those facts changed the answer. Victor studied me as if he had expected resistance. You admit you benefited. I inherited the house. That is a financial benefit. And you managed the appointments, held the keys, controlled access, arranged repairs, and knew you would benefit. I did not know the trust terms until after Frank died. The trust was created more than 7 years before I moved back. Victor produced the roofing invoice. The trust paid nearly $38,000 for this work. The roof was failing. You managed the project. That is my profession. You improved the value of a house you expected to inherit. I prevented water from damaging a trust asset. Frank approved the contract and payment. He questioned every repair, nursing invoice, visitor request, and delayed reply. I admitted that I had sometimes answered slowly when I was exhausted. I admitted that I felt relieved when visits were canceled because conversations with my family often left Frank agitated. I admitted that I believed I understood his daily needs better than relatives who rarely appeared. I did not admit that I isolated him, because I had not. The nurse logs showed that Frank attended therapy, church, a neighbor's retirement dinner, and occasional lunches at the Union Hall. The shared calendar showed visit offers and video call times. My work records showed I had not been sitting beside him every hour, controlling every conversation. The documents did not make me warm or welcoming. They showed the doors had not been closed. Victor's final question was quieter than the others. Isn't it true that you believed you knew what was best for Frank better than his biological daughter did? I often believed I understood his daily needs better because I was there. That sounds like yes. It sounds like the truth. My deposition lasted just under 4 hours. Dennis's began after lunch. I remained in the room beside Rachel while Dad took the chair I had occupied that morning. He appeared comfortable until Rachel placed the Western Keystone title report in front of him. Have you seen this document before? She asked. Dad adjusted his glasses. I don't recall. The report was emailed to you on April 12, 2021. I received many emails. Did you hire Western Keystone to research ownership of Frank Holloway's property? I may have requested general information. Rachel showed him the invoice bearing his name and credit card payment. Did you pay this? If the record says I did, please read the owner listed at the top of page 2. Dad looked toward Victor. Victor told him to answer. Frank Holloway, trustee of the Frank Holloway Revocable Trust. Rachel placed Dad's sworn declaration beside the report. You stated that you did not know Frank had created a trust until after his death. I did not remember this report when I signed that. You replied to the title officer 9 minutes after receiving it. I do not remember every email I sent 4 years ago. Rachel displayed the thread. If Colleen is his only biological child, can she challenge this after he dies? Did you write that? It appears to have come from my account. Was someone else using your account? Not that I know of. Then why did you ask whether Colleen could challenge a trust you say you did not know existed? Dad's face reddened. I was asking a hypothetical question. The report identified a specific trust attached to a specific property. I did not know whether it was the same trust being used now. Do you have an amended deed transferring the property into another trust? No. Do you have an amendment naming a different beneficiary? I never saw the full trust. Then what basis do you have for saying it was different? Dad shifted in his chair. Frank changed his mind constantly. Did Frank tell you he intended to change this trust? No. Did anyone else? No. Then that answer was speculation. Dad pressed both hands against the table. Rachel moved to Dana's email chain. Why did closing before December 20th matter? It was a target date. Why that date? I wanted the estate settled before the holidays. You wrote that the date was tied to a bank matter. Victor objected to the financial scope but instructed him to answer. It concerned private family finances. Did you intend to use proceeds from Frank's house to cure your loan deficiency? I expected Colleen to receive part of her father's estate. That was not my question. Dad's jaw tightened. If Colleen had received what she deserved, we would have used the money responsibly. To pay the bank? To protect our retirement? To cover the failed investment? It had not failed. The main lender had withdrawn. The project was delayed. Payments had stopped. Temporarily. Did Colleen know the second mortgage balance when you brought her to Frank's house with suitcases? She knew we had obligations. Did she know the amount? I handled financial matters. Did she know the bank deadline was 6 weeks away? Dad looked toward Mom, who sat behind Victor. That deadline was negotiable. Then why did Frank's house need to close before it? Victor called for a break. Dad stood so quickly his chair rolled backward. In the hallway, he demanded that Victor stop Rachel from exposing private finances. The conference room door remained partly open. I heard Dad's voice, even after Victor lowered his own. Dad noticed me near the water cooler. This is what you wanted, he said. Dragging private matters through the dirt. You filed the case. You could have ended it. By selling my house. By recognizing that you were not the only person Frank left behind. Rachel opened the conference room door. Claire, come back inside. Dad's deposition resumed, but he never recovered his earlier confidence. When Rachel asked why he called me a caregiver in the realtor emails instead of Frank's adopted daughter, Dad said Dana did not need family history. When she asked why he claimed I had no legal interest, he said adoption did not make me Frank's real child. Rachel read the adoption order into the record. Dad said legal definitions did not change blood. Rachel asked why blood should control the house when he and Mom had signed away every parental right to me. Victor objected that the question was argumentative. Dad answered anyway. That was different. He could never explain how. Mom's deposition began the next morning. She arrived in a pale blue blouse with tissues in her handbag. She thanked the court reporter whenever a document was adjusted for her, and spoke softly enough that everyone leaned forward. Dad had tried to overpower the questions. Mom tried to survive them. Rachel began with the adoption. Did Dennis force your hand onto the consent? No. Did he sign for you? No. Did you understand the consent was permanent? I understood the words. I did not understand what it would feel like. Did you know you had 30 days to revoke it? I was under enormous pressure. Did you attempt to revoke it? No. Did Frank prevent you from contacting your own attorney? No. Did Dennis tell you he would leave if Claire returned? Mom looked at Dad. Yes, Dad whispered to Victor. Rachel continued. Did you believe him? I had an infant. I had no stable income. I was afraid of losing my marriage and everything else. So you chose not to revoke the consent. I did not feel I had a choice. Those are not identical statements. Mom began crying. The court reporter offered a break. Mom declined. Rachel moved to Frank's final 18 months. Mom said I prevented meaningful contact. Rachel showed her a message in which I declined a therapy morning and offered 3 alternate dates. Mom said none of them worked. Rachel displayed another message, offering a video call. Mom said Frank was always tired when she tried to call. Rachel produced the nurse log showing he had attended a neighbor's retirement dinner that week. Mom said being able to eat dinner did not mean he was emotionally ready to see her. Did Frank tell you that? He did not have to. You are testifying about his preference. I knew my father. Did you visit on March 8th? Mom looked at the shared calendar. Yes. How long did you stay? I don't remember. The doorbell history showed 22 minutes. Did Claire ask you to leave? No. Why did you leave? Frank became angry. What were you discussing? Family. Were you discussing the house? Mom reached for a tissue. I asked why Claire was receiving everything. Those were your words? I do not remember the exact words. Did you ask Frank why Claire would get the house? Mom remained silent. Rachel placed the nurse's visit note before her. The note recorded that Frank became upset after Colleen questioned his estate plan and repeatedly asked why Claire would receive the property. Did you know the house was in a trust when you asked that? I knew Frank had made arrangements. Before his death? Yes. Dad leaned toward Victor. Rachel continued before either man could interrupt. Your affidavit states that you first learned Claire claimed the house after Frank died. I did not understand the legal structure. That was not your statement. Your statement was that you did not know Frank intended Claire to receive the house. Mom looked toward Dad again. He told me what to put. The room went still. Victor asked for a break. Rachel said she had only a few questions left. Mom turned to Dennis. You said the declaration was only confirming what we believed. Dad's face tightened. You knew the house was going to her. I knew he threatened it when he was angry. You asked him directly. Because you told me we needed to know. Victor repeated his request for a break. Mom did not stop. You told me the trust could not stand if Claire had controlled him. She did control him. You also told me the house would solve the bank problem. Colleen, you said it was a bonus. Dad lowered his voice. This is not the place. Mom laughed once without humor. No, the place was apparently Frank's funeral. Victor ended the deposition session for the afternoon. In the hallway, their argument continued behind a closed door. I could not hear every sentence. I heard enough. Dad said Mom was panicking and ruining their case. Mom said he had hidden the debt and used her father's death as a repayment date. Dad said she had wanted me to remain with Frank because one child was easier. Mom said he had called me defective. Dad said she had signed the papers willingly. Mom said he had threatened to leave. Each accusation was meant to transfer blame. Together, they confirmed that neither of them had been powerless. I did not feel triumphant listening to them. I understood that they had spent 33 years building a story in which no one had made a decision. Frank pressured them, poverty cornered them, marriage trapped them. I chose Grandpa. Claire controlled him. The trust surprised them. Under oath, the story could not hold its shape. Molly was not present for the depositions. Her lawyer received the transcripts and exhibits afterward. That evening, Dad sent her 6 messages. Molly later gave the complete thread to Samuel and Rachel. Your mother is confused. Do not let Claire use that against us. Keep your affidavit exactly as it is. You know Claire blocked visits. If you change your statement, the case may collapse. If we lose the house, we lose ours. That will be on you. A 7th message arrived minutes later. Remember why I asked you to take the box before Claire inventories everything? We needed something Frank had not filtered through her. Molly had never mentioned that instruction before. She had said she took the box because she believed Frank kept secrets and because Mom wanted to know what he had written. Dad's text showed he had directed her before the funeral reception. He had not protected Molly from the case. He had placed her inside it. The following morning, Molly met Samuel at his office. I learned the details later from her corrected declaration and from what she eventually told me. Samuel explained that changing her statement would expose the fact that she removed the box, withheld it after receiving notice, and omitted Dad's instruction from her original affidavit. He also explained that continuing to support a statement she now knew was incomplete carried greater risk. Molly asked whether correcting it would destroy our parents' case. Samuel told her that her duty was not to preserve anyone's case. Her duty was to tell the truth. She opened her laptop. The first paragraph admitted that she entered Frank's home in August and took interior photographs at Dad's request. The second admitted that Dad asked her to remove the gray box before I completed the inventory. The third corrected her claim that I refused every meaningful effort to visit Frank. She identified the dates I offered, the calls she did not return, and the occasions when Mom visited but left after Frank refused to discuss property. She did not excuse herself by saying Dad manipulated her. She wrote that she chose to follow his instructions because she believed I had received more than my fair share and because she feared our parents would become financially dependent on her. At the time, I knew none of this. I was at Frank's house reviewing my deposition transcript when Molly placed her hand over the trackpad. Her corrected declaration was attached to an email addressed to Samuel. Before she could press send, her phone lit up. The message came from Mom. "If you do this, you are choosing Claire over your own mother." Molly stared at the message from Mom until the screen dimmed. "If you do this, you are choosing Claire over your own mother." Samuel sat across from her in his office. He did not tell her what to do. He only asked whether the corrected declaration was true. Molly read it once more, placed her phone face down, and pressed send. Rachel received it at 8:43 the next morning. The declaration admitted that Molly had entered Frank's house while we were in Pittsburgh, photographed the rooms for Dad, removed the gray box at his instruction, and signed her first affidavit without verifying the full history of the visits she described. She attached the message thread in which Dad told her to keep the affidavit unchanged because their case might collapse without it. Through Samuel, she also produced a complete forensic copy of her phone, the emails she had sent Dad, and the original gray box with every remaining document indexed. Rachel asked whether I wanted to call her. "No. You may need to acknowledge what she did." "I will. Not before the mediation." Molly had finally told the truth. That was necessary. It did not make her the person who saved me. The mediation took place on April 21st, in a private suite near the courthouse. There was no judge, no audience, and no dramatic entrance. Each side occupied a separate conference room while the mediator moved between us. Rachel sat beside me. Evelyn remained available by phone in case the trust records required clarification, but she did not negotiate or argue. Across the hall, Victor represented Dennis and Colleen. Samuel attended for Molly because her corrected declaration had made her both a witness and a participant in the document dispute. The mediator was a retired probate judge named Helen Mercer. She began by explaining that no one would be forced to settle. Her role was to identify the risks each side would carry into summary judgment and any later proceedings. The first proposal arrived before lunch. My parents would withdraw their petition if I paid them $125,000. Each side would cover its own legal fees. We would tell relatives the dispute resulted from a misunderstanding concerning Frank's final intentions. Dennis wanted permission to enter the house every year on the anniversary of Frank's death. Colleen wanted several pieces of furniture, Frank's dining table, and a written statement from me saying that she had not voluntarily abandoned me. I read the proposal twice. "They are still asking for the house," I said. Rachel looked at the page. "Not ownership. They want money from it, access to it, objects from it, and my signature beneath their version of what happened." Helen returned to their room and asked whether they understood that the adoption consent, the follow-up letter, and Colleen's later correspondence directly contradicted the statement they wanted from me. Their revised response removed the exact wording about abandonment. It replaced it with a statement that circumstances beyond the parents' control led to Claire's adoption. I pushed the paper back. That is the same lie with fewer details. Helen did not disagree. She asked Rachel to summarize the evidence as we would present it in a summary judgment motion. Rachel did not build a theatrical display. She placed one document at a time on the table and explained what each one established. The trust and recorded deed showed Frank had transferred the house 9 years before his death. The medical assessment from the same month showed he understood his assets, relationships, and decisions. My employment and address records showed I lived nearly 2 hours away when the trust was created. Dana's emails showed Dad arranged photographs and a rapid sale before Frank died. The title company report and Dad's own replies showed he knew the trust existed 4 years earlier, despite swearing he learned of it only after Frank's death. The nurse logs, shared calendar, and messages showed that I sometimes restricted inconvenient visits but did not isolate Frank. Molly's corrected declaration confirmed Dad directed the photographs, the removal of the gray box, and the pressure to preserve an incomplete affidavit. Helen carried copies across the hall. She remained there nearly 40 minutes. When she returned, her expression was neutral. I advised them that the court may resolve the trust claims without a trial if it finds no genuine factual dispute about execution, capacity, or undue influence. I also explained that inconsistent sworn declarations create a serious credibility problem. "What about the false affidavits?" I asked. "That issue could lead to separate requests for sanctions if the court concludes the statements caused unnecessary discovery or motion practice. Nothing is automatic, but the risk is real." The next message from their room was not a proposal. It was an accusation. Dennis claimed Colleen had wanted to place me with Frank because she could no longer manage my behavior. He said she had asked whether adoption would end their financial obligations. Colleen answered that Dennis had threatened to leave if she brought me home. She said he called me defective because I told teachers what happened inside our house. Dennis then said Mom had willingly signed every paper and later asked Frank not to bring me to family gatherings. Mom said Dad had hidden the failed investment, ordered the title search, and planned the sale before Frank's death. Helen relayed only the parts relevant to settlement. Samuel later confirmed the rest through Molly, who had been called into their room when both parents tried to use her memory against the other. They were no longer defending a shared story. They were trying to be the less guilty parent. In doing so, they confirmed the pressure inside their marriage, the reason they kept Molly, the decision not to revoke the adoption consent, and the financial motive behind the lawsuit. After another hour, Molly entered our room carrying 2 certified documents. She did not sit beside me. She placed the adoption consent and the signed follow-up letter on the table, then looked at Rachel. "I need him to read them." Rachel said the mediation could not force Dennis to perform for us. "I know," Molly replied. "I'm asking him as his daughter." Helen took the request across the hall. Dennis refused at first. Then Victor advised him that continuing to characterize Frank as someone who stole me would not help negotiations when his own signatures said otherwise. They entered our room together. Mom sat at the far end of the table. Dad remained standing until Helen asked everyone to sit. Molly placed the consent in front of him. "You already heard this on the porch," Dad said. "Then read it again without calling Grandpa a thief." His eyes moved toward me, then back to Molly. He read the paragraph in a flat voice. "I voluntarily and unconditionally consent to the adoption of Claire Maddox by Frank Holloway and intend to permanently give up all parental rights to her." Molly slid the second page forward. Dad stopped at the first line. "Keep going," she said. He read the sentence beneath both signatures. "We do not plan to bring Claire back into our home. Please proceed without delay." Mom pressed a tissue to her mouth. "I was forced," she said. "Dennis made it impossible for me to choose differently." Rachel opened the gray box and removed a handwritten letter dated 7 months after the adoption became final. Evelyn's archive contained a matching copy with the original envelope and postmark. Rachel placed it in front of Mom. The letter was in Colleen's handwriting. "Frank, Claire is settled now. Please do not bring her to family events until Molly is older. It confuses everyone and makes Dennis angry. We need the chance to build a normal home without reopening the matter." Mom stared at the page. "I was trying to protect Molly." "From me?" I asked. "From confusion. I was 6. You do not understand what your father was like then. You chose not to revoke the consent. You chose to stay with him. Then you chose to keep me away because my presence made your home less normal." Mom's face folded, but I did not raise my voice. For years I had believed the truth would feel like winning once they said it aloud. Instead, the room felt smaller. Their excuses had protected a fantasy in which some hidden event could explain why I was the child they removed. There was no hidden event. There were repeated decisions. Helen called separate sessions again. The final offer arrived late in the afternoon. Dennis and Colleen would withdraw the petition, recognize the trust, return all property, and agree not to enter the house without written permission. They would not pay any portion of the trust's legal expenses. They would not retract their accusations that I manipulated or isolated Frank. The settlement would remain confidential, and each side could describe the dispute privately as they wished. Rachel explained the practical cost of refusing. A summary judgment motion would require more attorney time. Victor could file opposition, request argument, and challenge portions of our evidence. Even with a strong record, weeks or months could pass before a ruling. The trust would continue paying insurance, taxes, and legal bills. My job would continue competing with the case. "They are offering the property terms you wanted," Rachel said. "The question is whether the unresolved accusations matter enough to accept the additional cost." I looked through the window at the courthouse roof across the street. The house was secure. The title was documented. My parents could not lawfully move in or sell it. A private settlement would end the immediate threat. I also knew what would happen afterward. Mom would tell relatives she withdrew because she could not bear to fight her daughter. Dad would say legal expenses forced them to settle before the evidence was heard. They would keep the same story and ask me to pay for the privilege of escaping it. Helen returned with one final addition from their side. They would agree not to make new public accusations. They would not correct the ones already made. I thought of Aunt Linda asking why I sounded cold. I thought of Frank's friends hearing that I had controlled a vulnerable man. I thought of the title report Dad ordered 4 years before he claimed to know the trust existed. Most of all, I thought about the phrase Dad had written in his settlement letter. Peace requires everyone to give something. He still believed peace meant I surrendered whatever protected his version of the past. I pushed the draft toward Rachel. No payment, no rewritten history. If they want a judgment, I'm ready for one. Rachel studied me without touching the papers. Are you sure? I'm sure, I said. Rachel waited a few seconds before pulling the settlement draft toward her. I need you to understand what happens next. We file the motion, they oppose it. The court may schedule argument. The trust continues paying legal expenses until the case is resolved. I understand. You may win the house and still recover only part of the fees. I understand that too. Then tell me why you are choosing judgment. I looked at the signature lines Dennis and Colleen had left blank. Because their offer does not end the lie. It pays them to stop trying to take the property while allowing them to keep saying I stole it. Anyone who hears that version will assume I paid because I had something to hide. Rachel closed the folder. And if the court rules for you, then the trust stands because of evidence, not because I purchased their silence. It was not the fastest option. It was not the cheapest. It was the first decision in the case that did not treat my parents' comfort as a cost I was required to absorb. Rachel filed our motion for summary judgment the following week. The filing did not contain every painful detail of my childhood. Courts did not need to decide whether Mom loved me, whether Dad had been cruel, or whether Frank should have told me about the motel call. The legal issue was narrower. Frank created the trust in August of 2016. A recorded deed transferred the house into it. His doctor documented his capacity during the same period. Evelyn's file showed that Frank met with her independently. I lived nearly 2 hours away and had no role in drafting the trust. Dennis and Colleen had no evidence that I pressured Frank 9 years earlier. Their opposition relied on his later physical decline, my management of his appointments, and their claim that I restricted contact. Rachel answered with the dates. Frank broke his hip more than 7 years after establishing the trust. I moved back 18 months before his death. A caregiver cannot influence a decision that was completed years before the caregiving began. The court scheduled oral argument for June 4th. I attended with Rachel. Evelyn sat behind us because portions of her file were part of the record, but she did not argue the motion. Dennis and Colleen sat across the aisle with Victor. Molly did not attend. The judge asked Rachel about the medical assessment, the recorded deed, and Frank's independent meetings with Evelyn. Then she asked Victor to identify evidence connecting my conduct during Frank's final year to the creation of the trust 9 years earlier. Victor spoke about a continuing pattern of influence. The judge asked for a document, witness, or transaction supporting that pattern during 2016. He had none. The ruling came that afternoon. The court found no genuine dispute that Frank created the trust while competent, transferred the property through a valid deed, and acted independently of me. I was confirmed as successor trustee. My parents' petition was dismissed with prejudice. The order did not say I was a good granddaughter. It did not say they were bad parents. It said the house belonged to the trust and that they had not produced enough evidence to put their theory before a trial. That was enough. Their false statements created a separate problem. Rachel had requested sanctions for the costs caused by Dad's repeated denial that he knew about the trust. Mom's inaccurate claims about being denied all contact, and the missing box that Molly had taken under Dad's direction. The court set a hearing to determine whether any fees should be shifted. Victor contacted Rachel before that hearing occurred. This time, the proposed stipulation contained no payment from me. Dennis and Colleen agreed to reimburse the trust for a portion of the reasonable legal expenses directly connected to the misleading affidavits and delayed document production. They agreed not to enter the property without written permission and to communicate through counsel about any remaining estate matter. Most importantly, they signed a written withdrawal of their accusations that I had abused, isolated, or manipulated Frank. The statement did not call me loving. It did not call them wrong about everything. It said the evidence did not support their allegations and that they withdrew them. I signed the stipulation on June 12th. 3 days later, Dad left me a voicemail. His voice had lost the certainty he brought to the porch. The bank situation is worse than you understand. We have an offer coming on the house, but it may not cover everything. A temporary loan would keep us from selling under pressure. You could secure it against the property. This is your chance to prove you are different from us. He had found a way to make refusing him sound like inheritance. I sent the voicemail to Rachel and dictated one response. You tried to solve your debt by taking my home. I will not solve it by risking my future. Rachel forwarded it through Victor. Dad did not ask again. My parents listed their house on June 15th. They accepted a legitimate offer after 11 days. The buyer completed inspection and financing, and the sale closed on July 24th. The proceeds paid the second mortgage, the remaining investment loan, moving expenses, and their portion of the legal fees. They did not leave with nothing. They simply lost the retirement life Dad had promised, while concealing what it cost. He postponed retirement and accepted part-time consulting work with a small property management company. Mom moved into Aunt Linda's guest room before the closing. Linda gave her 3 months to find an apartment and required her to contribute toward groceries. Dennis stayed in a furnished rental near his new job. They told relatives they were taking time apart. No divorce papers appeared overnight. No single argument ended their marriage. They had spent years using the same story to cover different motives. Once the story collapsed, they no longer had a common defense holding them together. Molly mailed a check to Dana's brokerage for the abandoned property assessment and reimbursed the copying and forensic expenses caused by withholding the gray box. No judge ordered her to do it. She sent me a message afterward. I would like one thing of Grandpa's. I will accept whatever conditions you set. I gave her a 2-hour window on a Saturday afternoon. She arrived alone. I unlocked the door after she reached the porch and locked it again behind us. I did not give her a key. We went through the workshop together. Molly ignored the power tools and the antique measuring instruments that might have been valuable. She stopped beside a wooden toolbox beneath Frank's bench. The hinges were rusted. One handle had been replaced with a strip of leather. Inside were 2 hammers, a folding ruler, several worn screwdrivers, and pencils sharpened at both ends. He used to let me sort these when I visited, she said. I had not known she remembered that. Take it. She lifted the box with both hands. At the front door, she asked whether we could speak again. We can start with short calls, I said. We don't discuss Mom, Dad, the lawsuit, or money unless we both agree first. Are we going to be sisters again? We are sisters. That does not mean we know how to have a relationship yet. She nodded. It was not forgiveness. It was a door opened 3 inches instead of being removed from its frame. The roof was finished in the middle of July. I hired the contractor Frank had selected and let Marcus review the work schedule when one delivery conflicted with my school renovation project. I paid the amount not covered by the reserve Frank had set aside. For once, I did not supervise every nail. The first heavy rain came 2 nights after completion. I stood in the upstairs hallway and watched the ceiling remain dry. Then I began changing the house. I sold the formal dining set Mom had demanded during mediation, not to punish her. I sold it because Frank and I had eaten most meals at the kitchen table, and because the dining room had become a museum for furniture no one used. I donated 3 boxes of clothes. I gave Mr. Talbot Frank's union jacket because he had worn the same local number and cried when I offered it. I kept the repaired blue cup. I moved it from the workshop to a shelf in the kitchen. The cracks remained visible, but I no longer treated the repair as proof that everything broken should be returned to its original shape. Some things became useful in a different form. I returned to work full-time. Marcus kept several vendor responsibilities because he had handled them well, not because I had failed. Delegating stopped feeling like evidence that I was losing control. At the end of July, I booked a 3-day trip to the mountains. Frank and I had discussed taking it after his roof was repaired. His hip never became strong enough. For several minutes, I considered canceling. The house had been the last place someone left me, and the first place someone allowed me to stay. Part of me still believed that leaving it unattended invited someone else to decide it was no longer mine. I went to the attic and found the red suitcase beneath a stack of winter blankets. The zipper caught at one corner. The fabric smelled of dust and cedar. A faded luggage tag still showed the address where my parents had lived when I was 5. I wiped the case clean and took it to a repair shop. The owner replaced the zipper and reinforced the handle. He asked whether the suitcase had sentimental value. "I carried it here the night I was left," I said. He looked embarrassed and started to apologize. "It's all right, I'm taking it somewhere by choice this time." On the morning of my trip, I packed clothes, a book, and the repaired blue cup wrapped inside a towel. I had no practical reason to bring it. I wanted it with me anyway. Before leaving, I walked through the house. The workshop windows were locked, the kitchen faucet was off. The new roofline looked clean against the summer sky. Frank's coat no longer hung beside the door. I had folded it into a cedar chest with a few things I was not ready to give away. The house felt quieter without him, but it no longer felt frozen on the day he died. I carried the red suitcase onto the porch and locked the front door with my own key. When I was 5, I had stood inside that house because other people chose to leave me there. At 38, I walked away from it because I knew it would still be mine when I came home. You cannot choose the family you are born into, but you can choose what behavior you continue to accept. When someone uses guilt, money, illness, or family loyalty to pressure you into surrendering your home, savings, or dignity, do not rush to prove that you are kind. Slow down, document events, preserve messages, consult professionals, and separate compassion from obligation. Understanding why someone hurt you does not require you to remove the consequences of their actions. An apology matters only when it includes honesty, changed behavior, and respect for your boundaries. Remember that independence does not mean carrying every burden alone. Asking for legal advice, delegating work, or accepting help from others is not weakness. It is responsible judgment. Never let another person rewrite your history because the truth makes them uncomfortable. You can acknowledge your own mistakes without accepting blame that belongs to someone else. Peace is not purchased by rewarding manipulation. Real peace begins when your decisions are guided by evidence, self-respect, and limits. If this story reminded you to protect your future without losing your humanity, subscribe to the channel and stay with us for more stories about courage, accountability, and rebuilding life on your own terms.